Hey YouTube, Sig Shooter here. I'm going to go over some information on these Sig 238 938 of understanding what it means to be cocked and locked. Um, let's safety check this weapon. This one's obviously broke down. We're okay there. So you put a magazine in, you chamber around, your hammer's back, and you're ready to go. This weapon would be ready to fire. Now you can put the safety up, and the trigger will not engage the hammer. But what's really going on inside the weapon? What happens if it, fell off a roof and hit the ground? Would it accidentally fire? What's going on? Am I safe carrying this, in my pocket or waistband? And hopefully I can provide this information pretty quickly to understand what's going on. So this 238 and 938 have almost identical internals. And so on the back, so let me explain this. So on the back, what you'll see, let me get my camera to zoom in, is that's the end of the firing pin. And that's where the hammer actually hits. And if you can look down the barrel, you'll see a hole at the end. Okay? So I'm going to take this metal pick and I'm going to push on this end. And if you look down the barrel, get this lined up. Hopefully, there we go. If you look down the barrel, when I push this pin, you're going to see it come out on the very end, right there in the dead center. See the hole? See it come through the hole? And that's actually what hits your primer on the back of the bullet. So notice how easily that I could do that. But notice when, same thing with the 238, they're no different. When I pull this trigger back, I'm going to take this edge. Now it'll go in a little bit. I'm going to get right there and push on it. It'll go in just a little bit. I'm going to push right there. Let me get the camera to zoom in, sorry. I'm going to push right there pretty hard. And you can see it barely go in, but it hits a breaking point and stops. And why is that? Okay, well, I'm about to show you. So as I take this barrel underneath, there is this little, well, let's just call it a button for simplicity. I'm sure it has a technical name. And it is right there. This button right here. And that sits right on top of this extractor, this metal piece right here, and pushes it up. Well, the firing pin, I'll pull it, the firing pin inside of here, I'll pull it out, sort of looks like this pick. It's got some, some slots and serrations in it. So when this pushes this button up, it actually, think of it like this, like it sort of like locks the firing pin and keeps it from moving, and this prevents an accidental discharge if it falls out of your hand or slams down. When you pull the trigger, and let me adjust this camera here. When you pull the trigger, what you'll see is this top part, which is also the extractor. It goes forward. Oops, didn't mean to do that. It will pull forward. Thus, that button is spring loaded, and when this goes forward down, that pin will drop, thus allowing this firing pin to move. And when the hammer slams up against it, it will. So barring very catastrophic malfunctions of metal, and as we all know, anything can happen of metal breaking or something like that, so we always be very safe. But what I'm trying to say is, even if the hammer broke loose and hit this pin, this mechanism, and let me try to pull in right there. If you can see me hit it with this, let me just adjust my zoom here. There we go. I can take this with a pick And it's really easy, and just push it and you can see it go, get a better angle, in and out. And what that's doing, and let me just break this down so you can see inside. And if you ever want to take the firing pin out, I just usually take a little pick that you can get from Sears or something like this. I just push down on the top of this and then kind of pull down. And it is lightly spring loaded, so you know it can come shooting out. So I'll cover it up with my hand here and kind of show you what the firing pin will look like. So this is the actual firing pin. Let me get a zoom. Let me zoom out here. So these serrations that are here is what actually locks it, and the firing pin moves like this. So whether you're half cocked or you pull the trigger back or fully cocked, it's going to lock this firing pin and keep it from actually moving. So if I use this 238, so right now it is in the cocked and locked position. Let me zoom down here. Get it in focus. And if I take my pick and push on this firing pin, it will not go all the way in. It'll go a little bit, but it hits that stop. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this hammer down and I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to pull the trigger and hold the trigger. So if I pull that in, now you'll see that this will go all the way in and fire as it would normally. You know, I'm pushing really far in. But if I release the trigger and push it in, it just doesn't, it goes in, like I said, just a little bit, but it doesn't go far enough to actually hit the primer. So you know what, and that was really important to me, because I'm like, man, you know, if I have one in the chamber, you know, do I want to carry it, you know, cocked and locked? Do I want the safety on? Do I want the safety off? Well, you know, a lot of people say, you know, well, it depends what you want to do. Are you in a situation where you immediately have to pull your weapon and fire, or are you in a situation where you know, I'll give you 3 examples. Some people put a magazine and not chamber it, and they'll leave the hammer down and the safety off, and then if they're in a situation, a defensive situation, they'll pull it out and chamber it. And that's very safe, but I can also understand that you know, that'll cause noise, or it's possible that you could get a jam when you're trying to load the weapon. And so although it's very safe, that I understand why that could be problematic. The other thing is to have one in the chamber and with the magazine in, and have the hammer down. Now that's pretty safe, but the problem that comes in is you actually have to pull the trigger, and what I'll do is I'll put my finger here. You have to pull the trigger to release the hammer and slowly lay it down. And there is a risk that you could slip, because when you pull the trigger, you're disengaging all the safety mechanisms, and so there's a danger that you could flip it and boom, you know, the gun will go off. So that is a concern. But anyway, the second example is you've got one in the chamber, one in the magazine, and your hammer's down. And you could have safety up or safety down. Now remember, that safety mechanism is keeping the firing pin from moving. So even if something bumped the hammer really hard, or the gun fell out and hit on the hammer, it's not going to fire, barring any, you know, huge metal bending malfunctions. So that's the other way. And then the third way is obviously have the hammer back, and once again, that right there is well, let me do it this way, with the safety on. That's your third safe mode, but you know, we're going from very safe down to less safe. And pulling the trigger here will not fire the weapon. So even if the hammer does fire, As long as that trigger's not engaged and this, hopefully doesn't malfunction, then, even if this hammer flies, it's not going to move the firing pin. And then the fourth one is safety off, ready to go. Now this is probably more like a Ruger or an LC9 or Glocks or things like that, where people get concerned. It's like, oh, I don't want to carry them because, they don't have a safety. Well, this is a single action pistol, which means it has a very short range as compared to those like a Glock or the Rugers that have a longer trigger pull. And like I said, it's a preference. I'm not saying one's better than the other or anything like that. I mean, I like shooting the LC9, but anyway, so this is another mechanism that's saying, okay, this gun is ready to fire, the hammer's back, and the only thing that will really make it fire is depressing the trigger. So as I pull the trigger, the hammer fires and releases, such as that. So anyway, we'll go back over it again. Once again, this is the firing pin with the mechanisms in it, and I'll show you how to put this back in if that's interests anybody. I'll hold this to the last. Is there's the spring that's inside. So let me pull my camera up a little bit. Don't know if I can do this simply, but we'll give it a try. So you just there's a smaller end. Let me get the autofocus off here. There's a smaller end on the spring, and then a larger end. And so the smaller end actually is what goes on. The firing pin goes in this end here. The larger end is what goes in the weapon this way. Let me get back on autofocus here. And so what you usually will do is just push this down with your finger, and this is the plate that goes in on it, and just push this down, or you could have a little pick or a screwdriver or something like that, and just push it down. And then this plate slides in, usually it's better just to get the plate started, and then just push this down, and then the plate just pops into place, and the pin comes right out just like that. So anyway, I was a little concerned at first about whether I wanted to carry something cocked and locked, but once I took this pistol apart and figured out, hey man, how is this thing working? It's a lot safer. I mean, it was obviously well designed for that very reason, for concealed carry. So anyway, hope this gives an explanation of it. And so, however you choose to carry the weapon is obviously your choice, but at least you'll know that even with the, sorry folks, even with the safety off and the hammer back, the only thing that can make this weapon fire is pulling the trigger, and that's it. And that brings up another point. Some people will say, well, how does this, how does that compare to the Ruger LCP or LC9? It's a very deliberate pull for those firearms for the trigger, where this one, it's and I don't like to dry fire a weapon, but I'll do it at this point. I mean, it's a very short pull, which means if you're reaching in there and grabbing it under a stressful situation, then there may be a risk to do that. And that's why they often say you pull you pull the hammer back and put it on safety. Another point on these weapons is, somebody had asked me, says, when I pull this trigger back, and let's see if we can get a good view of this. When you pull this trigger back, you're going to hear a first click, and that's kind of a half cock. And you pull it back some more, and that's a full cock. Why does it do that? Well, the reason is if you pull it back for the first cock and you pull forward and slip, it keeps you from hitting the firing pin. And so that would be a case where you have one in the chamber, a magazine is in, and you have the safety off. Now, like I said, the protection is keeping the firing pin from firing, but at that moment you could draw your weapon and go like this, and you're ready to go. So, but like I said, there is a very much risk, and like I said, I have a tendency to put my finger right there and pull the trigger to release the hammer, and I slowly bring it back. You know, some people may just hold it with their thumb and do that to release the trigger, but there is a risk that one day you're going to slip. So just something to consider. That's all. So anyway, I hope this helps you guys out and understand some of the inner workings of these pistols. Have fun shooting.